Welcome back to From the Couch Sports. My name is Connor Bopp and I am your host today. There has been some crazy football going on lately. We have college playoff just began on Saturday, and we've got the NFL playoffs are about to begin this weekend. So let's just dive into it all. A lot of topics to go over. I'm going to start with the LSU Oklahoma game. I've been saying for a while, I don't think that a Big 12 team should be in the playoffs. I don't think Oklahoma belongs there at all. It showed during the game. They got blown out immediately. They gave up 21 points in the first quarter. They just kept getting blown out. They gave up 7 touchdowns to Joe Burrow in the first half. It was fun to watch LSU dominate the way that they did and see how great Joe Burrow has developed. But watching Oklahoma was just terrible. And it's the same thing year after year. We had these same issues last year. They had the same issues with Kyler Murray. Amazing offense, but they couldn't get it done against Alabama. The year before, much better game against Georgia, but they still couldn't get it done. I don't think they belong with these SEC teams. They just get bullied all over the field. Their defense was just awful. They did score 28 points. It was pretty much all in garbage time. But notables of the game, Joe Burrow, 29 of 39, 493 yards passing, and 7 touchdowns throwing the ball. And he rushed for a touchdown. Pretty sure that's a bowl game record. I know that 7 passing touchdowns was a record in a bowl game. It's just insane. He's a Heisman winner. He's going to be the first overall pick. It's all for a reason. And then we jump into what did Justin Jefferson do yesterday? 14 catches, 227 yards, and 4 touchdowns. That's also records. It was just an amazing game to see that offensive performance. It was like watching an NFL team play against a college team. It was crazy. Then on the other side, Oklahoma, they also had a Heisman finalist in Jalen Hurts. He passed for 15 completions on 31 attempts, only 217 yards, 0 touchdowns, and he threw a pick. And he had 14 carries for 43 yards and 2 touchdowns running the ball. He just couldn't get it done. He could not get it done against LSU's defenses. It was tough to watch, and after watching it, this is kind of the biggest game that we've had to see Jalen Hurts throw the ball in the tight windows. It's the biggest game where he's had to deal with tough defenses, and how does he adapt to that? And in my opinion, it's shown a lot. It's shown that I don't think that Jalen Hurts can be an NFL starting quarterback. I think he can be an NFL player. I think especially with the success that we're seeing with Lamar Jackson and a lot of these other more mobile quarterbacks, I think that he can be on an NFL roster. Maybe it's in a Taysom Hill type role where he plays a little bit of special teams and comes in and, he can still throw the ball, if he's like catching you off guard on like a wildcat play or something like that. But besides that, I really just don't see it. His stats, a lot of people are going to say his stats defend himself. He threw for 3,800 yards and 32 touchdowns, almost completing 70% of his passes. And he rushed for 1,200 yards, almost 1,300 yards, and 20 touchdowns. Now, he is a good running quarterback in college, but the thing that people aren't understanding is he's not Lamar Jackson. Now, Lamar Jackson wasn't just a good runner in college. Lamar Jackson's compared to Barry Sanders as a runner. Now, that's kind of generational that you don't just see, and it's not what Jalen Hurts has. He's a completely different style runner. He does have speed. I'm curious to see what he would run in the 40, probably a 4.5, 4.6. He's also got power. He can run people over. He can kind of be like a bigger running back in a way when he's running the football, but it's not in the same sense that Lamar Jackson is. He doesn't have that quick twitch speed, and his arm, it's just not even close to the arm that Lamar Jackson or a Kyler Murray or any of the other scrambling type quarterbacks have. That's just my opinion on the Oklahoma LSU game. I'm really excited to see LSU in the final, actually going against a good opponent. I personally, what I would have done if I was picking the playoffs this year, I still would have given Alabama or Georgia. It's a toss-up between the two. Both two-loss teams. Both would have put up much better of a game than a one-loss Oklahoma. Oklahoma should have been a two-loss team. They pulled back like a huge comeback win against Baylor in the first matchup they played against them, and they shouldn't have won that game. They should have lost it, and it should have been a Georgia or Alabama, but it's just the way that things have gone. But in my opinion, both of those teams, Georgia and Alabama, I believe they both played LSU, and they both put up a game. At least Alabama, and that was still a good game, and that was with an injured Tua. So personally, I know Tua wasn't going to be healthy, but personally, I think Bama would have put up a far better game. It wouldn't have been 63-28. LSU probably still would have won, but I wanted to see good games on Saturday, and we only got one. Clemson versus Ohio State. This game was amazing. This game, it looked in the beginning of the game that Ohio State was just going to take it and run. It looked like, damn, we're going to watch 2 blowouts this weekend. I really want to see what's going to happen in the championship. But then this game just, Clemson started battling back. Ohio State started up 16-0. Their defense was just completely shutting Travis Etienne down. They shut down Trevor Lawrence. They were up 16-0, but thankfully, because Clemson's defense, they were still in the ball game. Clemson held them to 3 field goals, basically all red zone stops. Their defense was really holding up in the red zone, and because of it, it was 16-0. And then just like that, Trevor Lawrence had a 67-yard touchdown. They had 2 touchdowns back-to-back. I think Etienne had a touchdown, and then it was Trevor Lawrence. He had a 67-yard rushing touchdown. He looked really fast. We haven't really seen that from him yet, and it was really fun to watch. He just ran. He like juked a guy and ran kind of around some blockers and ran straight 67 yards. They couldn't catch up with him either. It was crazy. So just like that, you're going into halftime 16-14. But there was a big thing that I'd like to show you guys. This kind of sparked Clemson. They were kind of out of it, and basically this player, Shaun Wade, potential first-round pick, he got ejected for a targeting hit, and it was on a 3rd and long, and it would have made, he had a sack, and it would have turned into Ohio State's ball, but instead it turned into a penalty, gave Clemson the first down, led to a touchdown drive, starting the 14-0 run to cap the second half. So I want to show you guys a clip from the Oklahoma-LSU game first with y'all. So LSU guy comes back, basically completely blindsides the dude for OU. Or I'm sorry, other way around. The OU guy comes back, blindsides the LSU receiver. He doesn't see it coming. He gets his head taken off. So then we go to the Trevor Lawrence play. Trevor Lawrence is a big dude. He's 6'6". He's got a little guy coming straight up the gut through at him. The guy ducks his head as he's supposed to when you go to tackle someone because you're not trying to hit him in the helmet. And so does Trevor Lawrence. They both duck their head at the same time. Shaun Wade hits him, and he's coming fast. He hits him hard. And then you get Chase Young at the end of the play, comes and throws Lawrence to the rest of the ground. And it's a sack. It ends the drive. Game 16-0. Ohio State's getting the ball back with 4 minutes left. And they're probably going to take control of the game. And this call ended up being a huge call and a big difference maker inside this game because Clemson got the ball back. And they drove. Etienne had the touchdown. Then they get the ball back again after an Ohio State 3-and-out. And then Trevor Lawrence has a 67-yard touchdown run. It was insane to watch. So that was big. And then we got another big play in the second half. So going into the half, they interview both Ryan Day and Dabo Swinney. And Ryan Day just seems crushed because of the call. You know, and he's even, since the game has ended, he's been talking about it and how it was just a bad call and how some of those moments can just change the game, you know. Moments like that can basically take all the momentum, and that's exactly what Clemson did. Ohio State had momentum when they were up 16-0, and Clemson just ripped it out of them. And then in the second half, we get this play. This is in the third quarter. It's 21-16. Clemson's up at this moment because they 3 straight touchdowns. And here we get a play. Trevor Lawrence throws the ball. I think it was T. Higgins. And if you watch this play in full speed, it looks like an incomplete pass. because how fast everything happens. He catches the ball. He doesn't turn upfield. He catches it, takes a couple steps, and then the ball's out of his hands and it's rolling down the sideline. But when they show a zoomed-in angle of this play, you see he makes a few steps. He makes, like, I think it's 3 or 4 steps that he makes. And Jeffrey Okudah, probably a top 10 pick in the NFL draft coming up, he strips the ball out. It looks like a forced fumble, and Ohio State picks it up, runs it to the house. They would have put them ahead, and they would have probably changed the momentum of this game. But it was also reversed. So couple of tough plays in this game because of refs. And it's tough to blame. It's hard to blame the refs for a loss. I don't like to do it in sports, but it's part of sports. It's human error. And the thing that we got to understand is this is football. There's multiple possessions. You got other opportunities. There's always another opportunity. It's like when you're watching boxing and you lose a unanimous decision and you're like, you know what? You could have knocked him out. In UFC, you lose by decision. You know, you could have finished it. You could have finished the game. There's so much. Ohio State, you were up 16-0. You could have not had 3 drives where you got stopped in the red zone. The refs had nothing to do with those drives. You could have punched in touchdowns there. Completely changed the course of the game. Even in the second half, you could have scored more than 1 touchdown. So then they get the ball back again. Justin Fields is driving. On this game, he had 30 out of 46 attempts, 320 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. This is coming from a guy who threw 3 picks all year long. He doesn't really turn the ball over. He's pretty good at that. And one of those picks was on the game-winning drive. Ohio State, despite the referees and everyone wanting to blame them, they still had a game-winning drive. They were on the drive. He threw to the receiver Olave. It looks like he did 1 or 2 things. He definitely stumbled. He stumbled at the end of his route, but then he turned left and Fields threw the ball right. And it was an interception, and game over, Clemson wins. When Ohio State was driving with a minute left, it was in the end zone. It would have been game over. Ohio State would have won and been able to go on to the national championship. So I understand the disappointment that refs keep making mistakes, especially at the NFL level, but at the same time, this is something Ohio State could have prevented if they knocked them out early. They could have, instead of 16-0, imagine if they were up 28-0. Well, yeah, that would have been if they had 4 straight touchdowns instead of a touchdown and 3 field goals. You know, and that's just how the game of football works. And even besides that, Ohio State had a pretty good game. J.K. Dobbins, it was an amazing game to watch. He had 174 yards and a touchdown. He did get hurt. He had an ankle injury, I believe, in the second half, and it kind of killed their offense. Because when he was in there, they just had that lightning spark. He could just go whenever, make those home run plays. Without him in there, they didn't really have that ability. They brought in the power back. Not a bad running back by any means, but he doesn't have the speed to take the top off the defense. So things completely changed in the second half because of that. And then, yeah, I mean, we can complain about all the bad calls, but it's just part of the game of football. It's been part of the game of football for over 100 years, and it's going to continue to be a part of the game of football. We're not going to have robots calling games. You know, everybody, it is crazy. Well, we sit on our TV and we watch that. It's crazy that they're missing these calls that don't look like they should be missed while they're sitting on the field and while they're getting the same replay that we get. But it's still human error. I really don't think that. I know some people are saying like, oh, maybe the games are rigged. All this definitely wasn't a rigged game because people would have much rather Ohio State LSU. That would the whole Joe Burrow situation. Joe Burrow facing his old team in the national championship. That would have been an amazing story. Would have made tons of money. But Clemson pulled it off, and you got to give them props because they kept fighting. They were down. They could have just given in and fallen apart. They really haven't faced anybody near as good as Ohio State, but they continued. They played a hell of a game. Trevor Lawrence played great, didn't turn the ball over in those picks. Travis Etienne, he had a couple receiving touchdowns. He wasn't able to run the ball. He was getting like 3.5 yards a carry. So he's decided, I'm going to make some plays in the receiving game. And he had two receiving touchdowns, 3 catches, and 98 yards. And T. Higgins, Justin Ross, both of those dudes were getting injured. Both kept going into the game. They played their hearts out. Not only that, Chase Young, who's this Heisman finalist as a defensive end, he was held to 2 total tackles, no sacks. He did get some pressure in there a few times, but he didn't make the biggest impact that we've seen him make all year long. So that's pretty much what I have to say about the game. One thing that was fun to see at the end of the game, so the guy who got the interception, the safety, Turner, he also gave up a big play earlier in the game, and coming over to the sideline. So basically, it was an all-out blitz, and he was the only one. And he's a safety covering a wideout. He gave up a touchdown, and coming over to the sideline, Dabo told him, he said, "You will make the game-winning interception," and then he did it. That's crazy. That's what you love to see in sports. Tremendous moments like that. I loved it. And then let's move on. Let's talk some NFL. Because why not? Go over some college. Let's talk some NFL. Week 17 just finished. I'm going to go over my award winners. For MVP, obviously this is Lamar Jackson. It's not really even much of a race, but I do have another guy I want to at least give some props to. He had 3,100 passing yards, 36 touchdowns, which led the NFL, 1,200 rushing yards, and 7 rushing touchdowns. 1,200 rushing yards. That's a running back. That's better than, I'm a Jets fan, that's better than Le'Veon Bell did this year. That's so good. And then only 6 interceptions, and he was only sacked 16 times. So the whole offense was showing up, and Lamar Jackson balled out all year. He's definitely deserving of the MVP. But let's give credit to Christian McCaffrey, because Christian McCaffrey played amazing. He had 116 yards and 116 catches and 1,000 yards receiving, with 4 receiving touchdowns. He had 1,300 yards and 15 rushing touchdowns. So he had 19 total touchdowns. One of the 3 people in NFL history to have 1,000 yards rushing and 1,000 yards receiving in the same season. He's sharing company with Roger Craig and Marshall Faulk, 2 of the best running backs of all time. Interesting thought, though, when both of them ran for 1,000 and received for 1,000, neither of them won the MVP that year either, because quarterbacks. That's just how the game's going to go. And now, Defensive Player of the Year. I feel like it's going to go to Stephon Gilmore. Out of this list of players, he's the only one that's on a really good football team. He only had 6 interceptions. It's very difficult to find cornerback stats because a lot of things that we want to know, like how many receptions did he allow, what was the QB rating. Those stats are very difficult to find on typical stat pages. But I watched a lot of his film this year on a lot of the games that he played in. Notably, I definitely saw him shut down Amari Cooper. Really, the only guy that I can think of that got the better of him was Devontae Parker in Week 17. That's just the final week, but outside of that, these are who I would give the Defensive Player of the Year to, because sacks matter. Chandler Jones, he had a quiet season. Not a lot of people were talking about him. He had 19 sacks, 8 forced fumbles, and 11 tackles for loss. You have to consider him as the Defensive Player of the Year, even though he's on a 5-10-1 Cardinals team. And then you got Shaq Barrett. 19.5 sacks, 6 forced fumbles, and 19 tackles for loss. But he's on a losing Bucks team, so yeah, they're probably not going to get the Defensive Player of the Year, and it's probably going to be Gilmore, unfortunately. But it's just all part of the game. Now, Coach of the Year, I think it's between 2, and I'm going to give it to John Harbaugh because he won the matchup, the head-to-head matchup between him and Kyle Shanahan, who would be the 2 probably Coach of the Year candidates. Both, it really depends on how Coach of the Year is judged. I would personally throw Mike Tomlin's name in the hat, but based on how these awards go, they're not going to give it to the team that's losing and missed the playoffs, despite him having to win significant games with Duck Hodges as QB and Mason Rudolph. But John Harbaugh brings in offensive coordinator Greg Roman, who was his brother Jim Harbaugh's coordinator in the 49ers when they took over Kaepernick, and they completely revamped the offense in the offseason. And they have the MVP quarterback. This team is just dominant. They're so good at running the ball, nobody can stop them. They play the number one rush defense Jets at the time, and they just ran the ball all over them. They just do this every week. Probably going to do it in the playoffs too. We'll see exactly how far it holds up. But I'm going to give him the lead because what he's done this year has completely changed the NFL. Now, what Kyle Shanahan's done, he's got an amazing defense, and he's basically turned Jimmy Garoppolo into that Falcons offense. It's very similar. He even has one of the same running backs that the Falcons had in Telvin Coleman. He's got Coleman and a bunch of running backs. Same thing they did with the Falcons a few years ago when they went to the Super Bowl. So they're an amazing team. He had a bounce-back season from last year's losing record, but they're not quite John Harbaugh. So then let's talk Offensive Rookie of the Year. This one's obvious. It's going to be Kyler Murray. Josh Jacobs might have made a case for himself if he played all season. He missed like the final 2 or 3 weeks. But Kyler Murray, 20 touchdowns, 12 picks, 3,700 passing yards, 64% completion, and 544 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. So he had a really great season. The Arizona Cardinals had 100 extra yards of offense this year than they did last year. So the hiring of Cliff Kingsbury and drafting Kyler Murray was huge for this team. This team's going to continue to grow and go forward. Larry Fitzgerald's really old. David Johnson's pretty much washed up. He fucked me over in fantasy. So Arizona, they got some growth to do because they only won 5 games. But next year, I'm gonna definitely say they're gonna be an underrated team to maybe not a playoff spot, but definitely pushing for a 500 record next year. Defensive Rookie of the Year, it's between 2 guys. It's edge rushers, as almost always. You got Josh Allen with his 2 forced fumbles, 10.5 sacks, and 11 tackles for loss. And you got Nick Bosa, a pick, a forced fumble, 9 sacks, and 16 tackles for loss. Probably going to give it to Nick Bosa, bigger name on the winning team. Kind of a history with the NFL. I might be willing to give it to Josh Allen if it was my pick, because technically he did do better. He had an extra forced fumble, a little bit better on the sacks, a little less on the tackles for loss, but they do not exactly play this identical position. Josh Allen's more of an outside linebacker, where Nick Bosa is more of an defensive end. So this is my opinion. Let's talk about the wild cards. Wild card weekend is coming up. First of all, we got the Titans and the Patriots. The Patriots lost to the Miami Dolphins, so now they don't get a first-round bye, and it's amazing to see. This is probably the end, but probably not in this game because it's in Foxborough. I think Patriots are going to win this one, maybe not easily, because Titans do have a hell of a defense. They got Derrick Henry. They seem to be pretty well coached, so I still think it's going to be a kind of a battle, but I think it's going to be like a low-scoring win for the Patriots, like a 17-14 or something like that. And then moving on, we got the Bills at the Texans. I think the Texans win this game. I think Buffalo has a hell of a defense, but I don't think Josh Allen can really score at the same pace that Deshaun Watson can. And not to say that Deshaun Watson's just going to blow out the Bills or anything like that, but the other thing that you got to count for is that Josh Allen is kind of turnover prone. He fumbles the ball a lot. He still has a tendency to throw interceptions. And then, I'm not 100% sure if this is officially happening, but J.J. Watt might be coming back for the game, so you add an extra all-pro defensive end on the Texans. That can definitely change things up. Let's talk to NFC. First, Saints, they're so mad. They got robbed this year too. let's talk. They didn't do anything to get robbed. It didn't even happen in their game. They would have. So basically, the 49ers, had they lost the game, they would have been a wild card team, and the Saints would have been with the first round bye. Well, the 49ers were going against the Seahawks. Seahawks were driving, game-winning drive, and Russell Wilson throws into the end zone. Blatant. It was an obvious pass interference call, and it didn't get called. So Seahawks lost the game. 49ers get the first round bye. Saints get screwed over again. They're pissed about it. But we got another big thing. Back to the whole referees keep fucking the game up. They do, but to a certain extent. Because in the same exact drive, they're on the 1 yard line. Marshawn Lynch running in there. He's about to punch that thing in. But the Seahawks get a delay of game call, and they take the ball back. And just like that, the game would have been in the bag. Seahawks would have won. Saints would have got the first round bye. But that's not how the game works. There's multiple opportunities in the game of football, and the Seahawks could have still won the game despite a bad call. So it gets us. Saints are hosting the Vikings. This is going to be a no-brainer. It's the Saints all the way. The Vikings are a good football team, but they got Kirk Cousins, and he's playing against Drew Brees, and they're playing a much, much better Saints team. Plus, Dalvin Cook, I'm pretty sure he's returning for the game, but he hasn't been healthy the last couple of weeks, so who knows? Is he going to be 100%? We'll have to see, but I still think the Saints got this. Still have an amazing offense, great defense. They're probably going to go pretty far in the playoffs until they get stopped. And then their fans are going to have to complain about something else this year. One of the most annoying fan bases in sports, in my opinion. But then we got Seahawks at Eagles. Seahawks got to win this game, in my opinion. You got Russell Wilson, one of the MVP candidates. Wentz is also definitely up there. I'm not going to knock Wentz. He played amazing in December. He's thrown to nobodies. They're pretty much all undrafted receivers. I think one of the stats from yesterday's game was like half of his completions were passes to undrafted receivers. Throwing touchdowns to no-name guys who've done nothing else in the NFL. But they squeaked into the playoffs. The only reason they got the home field advantage is because they won their division. So I think Seattle's going to come in there and take it from them. They're going to win this ball game, in my opinion. And that's going to wrap it up today. Thank you for tuning in. Subscribe to From the Couch Sports. Follow me on Instagram.